evening, good evening. You know what we're going to do now? We have to do our obligatory, can you hear me now? So if you will raise your hand so that I know that you can hear me before we get started. Hey, Becky, how are you, my friend? And Kimberly, how are you? Thought I saw a couple of other names that I know there. Well, thank you, Becky. I am well. There we go. I saw most of the hands go. There you are, Kathy Vickers. How are you? I thought I saw you there somewhere. Welcome this evening. Thank you all for your time. I'm going to thank you in advance. And of course, I will thank you. Thank you again when we finish. You are in the Defining an Early Childhood Education and Care Multi-Tiered System of Supports framework. Today, we are solely talking about defining it. We are not talking about creating it or implementing it. When you're talking about multi-tiered system of supports, it is a lot of information to go through, and there was just no way to do it all in a 2-hour period. In fact, I'll be very, very honest with you, to just talk about the whole breadth of defining MTSS in an early childhood education and care system and creating it and implementing it. Really, it takes like days to do it. But this is our opportunity to begin this conversation, especially in the time that we are in now with Every Student Succeeds Act and COVID-19 and all the things that we need to understand about building a framework, defining a framework of how we can take all of these tiered supports and evidence-based practices that we are called upon to implement and make one system out of them so that it's manageable. So tonight is defining an early childhood education and care system of supports. I hope that your schedule will allow you to join us February 3rd. 2021. I still can't believe I'm saying 2021, but there you have it. February 3rd, 2021. Same time, same back channel. I'm dating myself already, but that's okay. 4 to 6 o'clock. That webinar is going to be creating and implementing an early childhood multi-tiered system of supports evidence-based framework. Okay, so tonight is defining, solely talking about defining what it is not. February 3rd is creating and implementing, same time from 4 to 6 o'clock. And I will try or get, maybe Karen can put in it's really the same link that you got here tonight. It's that same link that you would use to sign up for February 3rd. Now you all know me. Those of you that know me, you know that I'm just already going to go off script. So, two things. I am seeing the name Donna Strong here, and I used to work with someone named Donna Strong. Are you her? If so, raise your hand or something, Donna. Oh my goodness. Hi, Donna. You know, the education is a very large, huge whale of a practice, and as big as it is, it's just as small. And I'm just getting ready to out you, Donna, so there you go. Aren't you glad you joined today? Years ago, when I was what was called Title 20 in those days, I started my career in daycare in Title 20. And it was housed in a parochial school, private school, Zion Hill Christian Academy. And at that time, I was blessed to meet and work with Donna Strong. We had children in the same grades with each other, literally. And this is my first time seeing that name. So welcome, Donna. I'm so glad that you joined me. And already we'll just have to connect with each other and get each other's information. So welcome, and welcome to all of you. Okay, I am back on track. Back to our regularly scheduled programming. You see here putting it all together. So what is that putting it all together in that parentheses? The it is the totality of this series that has been taking place since September. The foundation of teaching, learning, the series itself literally was a culmination of professional learning opportunities, with the bulk of them ending up with talking about multi-tiered system of supports, which is how we take all of these practices that we've been talking about and trying to, as I said before, create a system. What you see before you, I know some of you, Kim, Becky, Kathy, we've been on this journey together. Can you believe this is our fourth one? We only have one more to go. But the whole purpose of this was so that as we move through the series, when it's all said and done, we want to put everything together so that it is manageable for us. Now, if by chance you have not participated in each of the professional learning opportunities along the way, please do not be concerned. They were created. Yes, they're interrelated, but we also created them to be independent so that whichever one you joined, you would still be able to get something out of it for your own professional learning and growth and for that of your children. As Karen said, this is being sponsored by Early Childhood Professional Learning in collaboration with Kids Kindergarten Individual Development Survey, and the professional learning coordinator for kids is Michelle Escapa. So what do ECPL and kids have to do with each other? The Pre-2K Collaboration Project. The Pre-2K Collaboration Project was inspired by the Kindergarten Transition Advisory Committee report that was released in September 2018. And you know, in Illinois, we're not satisfied unless we create an acronym for something. So the Kindergarten Transition Advisory Committee report is commonly and affectionately called the Ktac report. That report was actually brought to life by the Illinois legislative body, really wanting to get a better understanding of why children are not transitioning from early childhood education and care to kindergarten seamlessly. And those of you that remember the romper room lady and Miss Crump, I mean, this is not new. Children have been leaving early childhood education and care and going to kindergarten for years, yet we still were finding there were some loopholes in the practice in Illinois. So the legislative body wanted it to be studied. The Ktac committee studied it for over a year and a half. September 2018, they came out with this report. And then what happened is that Cindy Berry, who's the program director of ECPL, and Michelle Escapa, what they did was just took that report and just combed through it and wanted to come up with a way for the themes of the Ktac report to come to life and be a living, breathing practice in our state. So rather than just a report, it goes out, sits somewhere and collects dust. So what they literally did was look through that report, figured out through kids coaching and ECPL coaching and professional learning, the work that they're doing, what better way than to bring something like the Ktac report to life than by working with the people who are in the field, doing the work with the programs and bringing them together to collaborate. And so thus the Pre-2K Collaboration Project was born, and this entire series has been a product of that. So what did the Ktac Advisory Committee report give us? Here are just the themes. The report itself, of course, talks about a lot, but it's bulked into themes. And the themes are around aligned teaching and learning, aligned assessments and data, and strengthen cross-sector partnerships. So through this series that we have been doing, we've been pulling out what does it look like to have aligned teaching and learning from early childhood education and care to kindergarten, aligned assessments and data, and more importantly, how do you have a strengthening of cross-sector partnerships? So here is what has been happening. Each of the webinars or professional learning opportunities, they have the same name, but one has been given specifically through kids as a kids offering, and we've had teachers, administrators from kindergarten all the way up to 5th grade, 6th grade. We've had superintendents at principals, and then the same name but developmentally appropriate practice conversation from the early childhood education and care, which is what ECPL is doing. So literally, we're talking about it in a way that makes sense for the practice. And then ultimately, you'll see how we bring everybody together. I am your host for the evening. I'm Dr. Antoinette Taylor. Little bit of information about me you see before you. Lots to talk about as we think about what has happened from the lame duck session that just occurred in Illinois. I have some updates that I will be sharing with you all later. The foundation of teaching and learning, assembly required. That was Lynn Burgett's little take on the thing. You know, what we are finding out and what we've always known is that on paper, things look so good. And then we get to the point to where we have to actually make it work. And that's where the assembly comes in. Putting in the work, the professional learning, understanding your curriculum, all of those things. So the foundation of teaching and learning is one thing, but to really make it work, there is some assembly required. And this is what we know. In order for it to really have a holistic system that moves us from infancy all the way to higher education, Illinois is a P20 state. You've got to be willing to put in that work, which all of you are doing. That's why you're here with me tonight. But our goal for the series was just to kind of give us a way to talk about some of the things. It's in our portfolios, but we don't always remember to go back to our portfolio, especially in the times that we're living in now. As a part of each of the webinars, here is the thing that to me has been my favorite part, is a live table talk. So you know, with the professional learning opportunity, especially one that's virtual, yes, we do have a lot of chats and polls, but we don't get that opportunity to really talk live. Well, for the table talk, what happens is all of the folks that participated in the kids professional learning opportunity and all the people that participated in the early childhood education and care professional learning opportunity, we come together for a live table talk. So it is us on a Zoom meeting basically, and we take folks off of mute. I share updates if there's any unanswered questions about the previous professional learning opportunity. We answer those. As I said, we share like hot off the press updates. You do receive a professional development hour for it. And I'm always referencing resources in the webinars, and people are always putting in the chat, how can I get that, Dr. Taylor? And so what we have done is with each table talk, at the end of the table talk, we offer, they're not door prizes, they're Zoom prizes. So take a screenshot of this. January 27, 2021, from 4 to 5 o'clock, you will receive a non-transferable link, and that literally means they check the names for entering the Zoom with those who participated today through the end. You will get a link. You register for the Zoom table talk on that link, and then we'll see you all on January 27th. And it has been wonderful having all the administrators of early childhood and principals and superintendent and K-5 and classroom assistants coming together to talk. Now, to that end, we have invited special guests to join. We had the president of Illinois AEYC join me for one, and then the one we had in November, I was joined by my very good friend, Dr. Christina Passione-Zayas, who is the former Associate Vice President of Policy for Erickson Institute. It was very well received. Everybody let us know that they loved I guess, They said, everyone said that Christina and I have we make a very good tag team. So I invited her to join me for January 27th. Well, we've had some updates since then. December 21st, Christina was appointed to the Senate in Illinois. She fills the vacated seat of former Senator Iris Martinez. She was appointed to that role December 21st, serving the 20th district in Illinois. She just completed her first lame duck session. Immediately after she was appointed to this role, she did give me a call, and she wholeheartedly said, I still want to do the table talks. So she and I have been in conversation with each other before the lame duck session, during the lame duck session, and she is going to join us on January 27th. She will be joining us in her role as Senator Passione Zayas, but she is still consulting in a consultative role with Erickson, and there are many policy things that she and I were working on there. So she will join you with both of those hats on. So again, hope you can join us on January 27th. She's excited, and we're really excited to come together with you all and share updates and get the information that you want us to take back to the legislative body, the governor's office, and all those other things. All right, that said a lot. So what we're going to be doing tonight, we are not going to be taking a break. We're going to go straight through, and you're going to get your time back at the end of our time together tonight. So it is already 4:17. Many of you have been on a Zoom meeting or a Google platform or this platform or whatever platform. If you feel like you need to take a break, get up, stretch your legs, get some tea, get some hot chocolate, please feel free to do that. We will keep moving along. But I just want to let you know we're not going to be taking a break tonight. I'm also aware, Cindy Berry, I see you're on here, so I'm about to go rogue. So those of you that know me know I have a tendency to do that. Something important happened in our country today. We inaugurated the 46th president. I am aware that there are some people who are joining me today who want to watch the festivities that are going to be happening this evening in celebration of the inauguration of the 46th president. I am also keenly aware that some of my colleagues joining today, this was not a day of being grateful, it was a day of grief. The person who you wanted to stand on that podium was not there. I understand that, and I want to validate however we might be feeling in this moment. So some of us want to have the opportunity to stretch our legs so that we can watch what's happening on television or rewatch the inauguration. Some of us, this is a moment of just pulling back, turning off the TV, thinking about, 4 more years from now. I understand that. I validate that. And I just wanted to share that with all of you and still say, as a community of educators, we can still be united for the sake of our children and for the sake of our profession. So that was my soapbox, or whatever you want to call it. But again, I think it's important to acknowledge where we might be, wherever that is. So no break tonight. We're going to go straight through. You get your time back at the end for you to have the rest of your evening. We are also practicing grammar, Grace, and I've been saying that over and over and over again. We're too tired already to be trying to figure out, did we dot every I and cross every T? So when you jump in the chats, just feel free to get in there and don't worry about, did I spell that right? Is that comma or colon in the right place? First things first, I must share with you that nothing that is going to be shared today is meant to impede any of the things that you see in front of you. The Department of Education has been very, very clear since COVID-19 that the federal law of the land is still exactly that, the federal law of the land. So these first 4 bullet points are federal laws. They have not been amended due to COVID-19 or anything else. So we are still bound by them. We know that the State Board of Education has been giving guidelines continually, as well as the governor's office. The executive orders seem to change daily. So anything that you are hearing tonight, what supersedes that is the federal law and guidelines coming from ISB and the governor's office. And then finally, as we are back remote learning, whatever your district or director has put in place, please, you want to make sure that you're bouncing everything back with them for understanding. All right, now that I've done all that talking, who am I talking to? What type of program do you have? Do you have a district? Do you have a charter? Do you have a private program? Do you have a PFA program, a PFAE program, Head Start? Go ahead, jump in here on the poll that you see is in front of you. You also can type, pull that up as well. Hey, Crystal, yes, love Head Start. Yes, yes, look at that. Beatrice, early Head Start. Love it. We have had so many early Head Start and PI folks with us. And I have to just say, we are a P20 state, but so much of the conversation that we've been having, especially at that transition level, is where does it really start? We minimally have to start, and for those of us that are in special education, you know, where will I be when I am 3? Everything starts at that 2.5 year mark up. So welcome to all of our early Head Start folks, our Head Start folks. I thought I saw Lab School for ISU. Hi, Jessica. My daughter is an adjunct at ISU, so welcome. So happy to see you as well. Looks like the majority of us are our district, and those of you that are other, you went ahead and jumped in the chat. Thank you so much, Rachel. And I do see some private as well. Brenda and Rachel, welcome, welcome, welcome. And I do want to say to you, multi-tiered system of support is for everyone, whether you are in private and anybody that's with Head Start or community-based. You definitely need multi-tier system of supports as part of your framework because of all of the different things that you're called upon to juggle every day. Thank you all for sharing. Your next thing is, what is your current role? Are you an administrator, a consultant, a teacher? And we always put that pre-KK or other because, and Cindy, we were so excited last week. We are starting to have bus attendants, coming on these webinars. And isn't that the true meaning of cross-sector partnerships? Family members, grandparents. Hey, Crystal, there you are, instructional coach. This is so important that we all come together to hear and learn. Dana, whoop, whoop. We love our related services personnel, bilingual academic. Hey there, Jennifer, yes, multilingual learners. And by the way, Jennifer, Karen, if you wouldn't mind putting in the ESSA Multilingual Conference information into the chat. I just want to let you know, Jennifer, and for those of you that are on with me today, the ESSA and Multilingual Conference is combined and it's virtual this year. There's going to be some great presentations. I'm not just saying that because I'm going to be one of the presenters, but some really great presentations. So I hope that you'll be able to join the center who puts on both of these conferences, usually physically separately, but for 2021, because of the circumstances we're in, they are going to be virtual and they're going to be combined. Thanks so much for sharing, everyone. And our administrators, I'm going to go ahead and move on, but if you were one who said administrator, if you would not mind putting that in the chat, like, are you a principal, superintendent? We've had a lot of administrators where their districts are, which we love, starting to define early childhood as like the birth to 3rd grade coordinator or the pre-K to K coordinator. I think we had someone on before that was birth to 5th grade. So go ahead and let us know what role you play as an administrator. Okay, briefly share where you are when it comes to multi-tier system of support, when it comes to either one of these things. And don't know enough to know what I don't know is a valid and credible answer. Wow, Lynn, you have got your work cut out for you. Director of EC for District with ECSC, PFA, and K. Melissa Bellino, I feel like I know your name. Always very excited to have our classroom assistants and peer professionals with us. So I want to welcome you as well. Love that. So between don't know enough to know what I don't know, exploring, developing, building, and question mark would be like, I'm just sitting up here scratching my head. About 48% of us are saying, hey, I don't even know enough to know what I don't know. Hey, Dr. Taylor, that's why I'm here tonight. Those of you that are in that developing and building stage, again, we're talking about defining. So this will be a refresher for you. And really and truly, I hope that you can join us for in February when we do the creating and implementing webinar. Thank you all so much for answering that. And we're all learning from each other. You see, that's why I try to call out what's in the chat so that we can all learn from each other. Then I want everyone to just give me your thoughts on what do you hope to take with you today from our time together. What do you hope to take with you today from our time together? Now, this time goes by fast. If I don't get to every question or every thought or every chat, I do get the transcript from this, and that's also another reason why we ask you to type in, because it helps me to do a couple of things. It lets me know if there were any major things that we missed so that I can bring them forward during the table talk. It also, and poor Cindy, I know she's like, why did I come on here tonight? I didn't know Antoinette was going to keep calling my name, but she is the project director for ECPL, and literally webinars, series, everything that they do, the professional learning, it is informed by what is in the field. So we take a look at this information, and then we're able to say, okay, this is the next thing that needs to happen. And believe it or not, the 21-22 professional learning year is already being planned. So we get this information. I get to comb through it. It informs our practice. It lets us know what are the immediate needs and what are the long-term needs. So I'm seeing here more about framework supports, a general idea of what MTS is and entails. Information to help us build a system within our school to support children. How to develop policies that support continuum support. Yes. Family engagement. I love that one. And if we haven't learned anything else by COVID-19, we must now walk the walk that we've been talking, which is that families are so important. And that's a huge one. I'm going to talk about actually what Illinois is saying about involving families when it comes to multi-tiered system of support a little bit later. All right, so then we've got our essential questions. What is multi-tiered system of support? How does multi-tiered system of support impact the referral and evaluation process? How is evidence-based research defined? And what are tiers? And here I mean TIERS, although some of us have cried some TEARS dealing with this whole thing of COVID-19 for sure. So tonight, I want to let you all know, as they used to say on Dragnet, the truth, the facts, ma'am, just the facts. We will be talking about multi-tier system of support from the lens of the truth when it comes to the letter and intent of the law. What does the letter of the law say? What was the intent of the law? That is the baseline of our starting point for all of our MTSS discussions that we will be talking about today and moving forward. So what are they? It's defined in the law. Now, what we call MTSS today is a holistic framework that was born from response to intervention, formerly known as RTI. It was referenced in the No Child Left Behind Act, which was reauthorized as Every Student Succeeds Act in 2015, but also in the current Individual with Disabilities Education Act. This is important because although No Child Left Behind has been reauthorized, IDEA still has not. Our country is very, very behind in reauthorizing IDEA. So the tenets of that, how are children responding to our practices? Do we have a system in place that when children do not respond to our instruction, to the curriculum that we're implementing, what system do we have in place that shows we've documented it? We've tried to give them additional supports. We've looked at data and we've analyzed it. All of those tenets are still in IDEA. And so it is very important for us to understand that when it comes to dealing with children with disabilities particularly. So as I said before, remember that first things first? That Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, I had that at the top. Why? Because this is exactly what happened when states were defining what their response to intervention practices were going to look like. In 2011, a memo went out from Melody Musgrove. She was in the Department of Education at that time in OSEP, and it was found that people were building their RTI practices to delay or deny a referral for a child to be evaluated, to be ruled in or out of specialized services. So in 2011, this memo went out to all state superintendents, and you see what it says. Not only did OSEP put the statement out, the Council for Exceptional Children, the Illinois State Board of Education, OSEP came back and put out another memo in 2016. It is so strongly used in Illinois that just this past August, the Illinois State Board of Education updated its Illinois State Board of Education Educational Rights and Responsibilities and changed all the language from RTI to MTSS. And we do have a link in this PowerPoint for you so that you can have that. So ever since No Child Left Behind, there has been guidance on what this means under the federal law when it comes to students with disabilities. And here's what everybody's been saying. State Board of Education said this. The letter from Melody Musgrove said this. The Council for Exceptional Children said this. Now look at these dates, everyone. That's what I really want us to look at. When we're talking about multi-tiered system of supports, it is a framework. Although the name is different, the thought, remember the intent of the law, this has been around. This is 2021, literally going on almost 13 years. So before the Department of Education Office of Special Education Programs said something in 2011, before the Illinois State Board of Education said something in 2009, the Council for Exceptional Children got wind of this and they started talking about it way in 2008. So now that means we need to look at the historical context of multi-tiered system of supports. Federally in our country, by July 1 of the 2010-2011 school year, every single district in this country, if you were publicly funded, was to have a response to intervention implementation plan in place. That was per the federal law. By July 1, 2010 of the 2010-11 school year, every district that was publicly funded was supposed to have a plan in place. Well, what does that mean? The plan had to show how you permit the use of a process of students' response to interventions. We must document our practices and how the student responds. And we must show what we do when children do not make adequate progress across grade levels. Illinois, of course, adopted that, created its plan. Because of the law, every state education agency had to create a plan by January 1, 2008 and send it to Washington, D.C. for it to be approved. Very much like ESSA. When ESSA was created in 2015, our state had to create an ESSA plan. Once the Department of Education approved the state's RTI plan, then The State Board of Education shared that plan with every school district, and that school district had to give their plan to ISB by January 1, 2009. Between the 2009, once the State Board of Education improved the district's plan, every district had between 2009 and 2010 to do professional learning, make sure every teacher, every family member, every principal understood how RTI would be implemented within that district. Dr. Taylor, why are you talking about that? Because it's very important, number one, that each of us recognize that within your district where you are now, there should be an RTI plan. Why am I mentioning that to you? Because as we move on to the point of talking about creating and implementing, you do not always have to start from scratch. That baseline is what was your district's thinking when it came to RTI back at that moment in time. Now, no one may know where it is, but I'm telling you, by mandate of the federal government, your district that you are in, especially if you are K up, has an RTI plan that was created somewhere around 2010-11. Prayerfully, it's been updated, but even if it has not, it does exist. This is not a new initiative at all for anyone. So now, where does it take place? Under the federal law, primary grades starting at kindergarten all the way up through high school, K through 12. Under the federal law, it's a whole school involvement. So with Dr. Taylor, since No Child Left Behind is not with us anymore, and IDEA is specific to children with disabilities, why are we even talking about this? It's because when Every Student Succeeds Act was being created, the people who were sitting around the table were saying, this is now our opportunity to shift away from RTI, which is that framework of that green, yellow, and red triangle. And folks were talking about problem-based solutions and putting kids in tiers, to really letting it be what the intent of the law was, which is a holistic process for whole school, whole child, and whole community. So this is what ESSA gave us for multi-tiered system of support. And slowly but surely that language started shifting from RTI to multi-tiered system of support. Notice that first bullet point. So all of my bilingual peeps on here, what is it saying? We can improve outcomes for which students? All students, including our high-performing students. And that is important because not every child is struggling. Even in early childhood education and care, some of our 3-year-olds look like they're going on 13, and some of them look like they're going on 30. So what type of support do we have in place as educators when you have those high performers? What about our multilingual learners? What about our twice exceptional children? They qualify for specialized services because they are challenged in one area of development, and then they are above in another area of development. Under ESSA, multi-tiered system of support is more clearly defined. Under ESSA, evidence-based practices are more clearly defined. So ESSA shifted away from talking about scientific-based research to evidence-based practices. And for us in early childhood education and care, that's huge because we're constantly talking about what is developmentally appropriate and what is a practice that is based in evidence. So now all of that is great, but there's one thing, Dr. Taylor, that you are not talking about. Sorry about that. I changed the screen there. Can everybody still see this? Okay, thanks. Thanks, Kim. I just want to make sure I had a little trigger finger, happy trigger finger there, and I switched the screen up a little bit. So under Every Student Succeeds Act, evidence-based is defined, and it gave us more of a determination of what MTSS is. It is one system of multiple supports. It takes all of these evidence-based practices and all of these supports, and it creates one system that is meant to meet the needs of all children. Here is what all looks like. Now, when you look at those question marks, those were the unanswered questions left at the letter of the law. So we, in our community, started saying, who else fits in the diversity continuum of all? Families would fit in there. We must think about mental health, LGBTQ, children, families. We also have to think about the purpose of MTSS. So if the whole child should have their unique needs and abilities addressed, is it not also important for educators to have their unique needs and abilities addressed? So the shift from response to intervention to multi-tiered system of support is that when you build this system of tiered supports, we are looking not only at the needs and abilities of our students, but the needs and abilities of educators. And educators includes paraprofessionals. In early childhood education and care, we know that for sure because ECHRS 3 is very specific in saying, hey, when we say staff, we don't differentiate teacher from the classroom assistant. If you are an adult in a classroom that is regularly touching the lives of a child, you are under the purview of the practice. And so multi-tiered system of supports, it literally looks at the unique needs and abilities and strengths of teachers and creates a system whereby we can support the teachers and the educators and the classroom assistants to do the job that we've been asking them to do, using all of the initiatives and reforms that they're required to understand. But then that question mark did something else. If this is so wonderful for the K-12 community, we found ourselves asking, wait a minute, what about early childhood? Because in fact, the early childhood umbrella is what? Birth to 3, 3 to 6, 6 to 8. So here's where we start talking about letter of the law, intent of the law. The letter of the federal law, whether it was No Child Left Behind or whether it is Every Student Succeeds Act, is K-12. IDEA, however, starts at the age of 3 and goes through the last day of the 21st year of life. So if IDEA is telling us under the law it's at minimum the age of 3, would the intent of the federal law also tell us the unique needs and abilities of children who are young, 3, 4, 5, and according to when their birthday is, 6, in an early childhood education and care community? Do they not also need the tiered supports that will help the educators and the children have the opportunity to quality teaching and learning experiences? There's that little Venn diagram. You see that overlap there. Illinois had these early learning priorities: economic support to family, health care, mental health services, the welfare of children. If we increase access opportunities and awareness, early intervention, special education, then look what's supposed to be happening in Illinois this year. 80% of all children should be ready for kindergarten. Will they be ready for kindergarten if we only look at a practice at the K up? Or will they be fully ready for kindergarten if we combine practices thinking of the intent of the law as well as the letter of the law? So here's that prime example. Letter of the law: hold child, prevent, proactive, evidence-based, developmentally appropriate, equity. Intent of the law: for whom? K-12 initiative, yes. The question is answered. For sure, MTSS is for all, including early childhood education and care, students, teachers, educators, administrators. This is a big piece of what the Pre-2K Collaboration Project has been doing. It is working to bring administrators to the table at the early childhood education and care, and this includes Head Start. I can't tell you how much we heard that this summer. ECPL, Cindy and her team, bless them, when we shifted to virtual learning, especially in the spring, and everybody was trying to figure this out. They sponsored many online virtual professional learning opportunities. I mean, and they were packed to the hilt. And I was blessed to be able to do many of them. And what we were hearing from and I'm saying our colleagues in community-based programs, they were saying in the chat, nobody is talking to us. We have children who are aging out of our programs, and the school districts are not talking to us. We can't help our parents because we don't have that communication. We don't have that collaboration. So a big part of what is happening through the Pre-2K Collaboration Project, and even as you talk about multi-tier system of support, is that cross-sector understanding. And you're right, Lisa, so many of the children in Head Start have extra needs. Wouldn't we be wise to, number one, create the tiered support system as early as possible to be able to address those needs? Wouldn't we be wise to make sure that the educators and community-based and Head Start and preschool and private are having opportunities to talk to kindergarten and up, because they are all our children? And 9 times out of 10, those children are going to transition into that public school setting where they're going to be entering into kindergarten. And wouldn't it be nice to have a seamless transition where we don't lose children in these early years, where we can make sure that the families have an understanding of what it means to transition from early childhood education and care to kindergarten, so that when our kindergarten teachers are implementing the Kindergarten Individual Development Survey, they have a full breadth of knowledge about the children that they are receiving, and we've been able to work together. And remember, part of MTSS, the letter of the law, is we've documented. So we can create these wonderful portfolios to send off with our children and their families when they transition to kindergarten, so that teachers are not feeling like they have to always start cold when it comes to children. Why is this also important? Because we know that not every child that enters kindergarten had the benefit of a Head Start, a PFA, or PFAE experience. So as much as we can share information for the children who did, that makes it easier on our kindergarten teachers and classroom assistants, so that they are not struggling to try to find out from a blank slate about so many children. So the benefits of MTSS are really, really very clear. And although the letter of the law does not say it, the intent of the law speaks to it. And I have to say, through ECPL, and Karen, I believe you were a part of this. We kind of wanted to do a backwards history walk, and what we found is that ECPL has been leading the way in early childhood MTSS literally since before the state's RTI plan was created. So someone was wise enough to say, wait a minute, we need to be talking about this in early childhood, and ECPL has taken up that work and continues to move it forward to this very day. Now, breaking news. This is what I talked about when somebody was mentioning family engagement here. You see before you the Illinois Omnibus Education Bill, which is commonly known now as Public Act 101-0643. July 1st of 2020, the governor signed this bill into law. The bill itself, 700 pages, so I know you all had time to read this in your spare time for sure, right? If you didn't, don't worry. People like me were combing through it and having meetings, and I think Cindy and I were meeting, and all the consultants we were meeting, combing through this 700-page bill to try to make sense of it, understand it, and be able to help folks implement it. Well, within that law, there's very, very specific language about children with IEPs, multi-tier system of support, and these practices. Here's what the law says. Copies, and I know, it's like against the professional learning rules. You're not supposed to read a slide word for word, but this is really important. So I'm going to read it word for word, and then I'm going to add to it. Copies of all written materials that will be considered for the IEP team must be made available to that child's family 3 days in advance of an IEP team meeting. This does not change because we are in a period of remote learning. Remember, the Omnibus Education Bill went through our state legislative body during the special session that was held this spring. So as you look at this, I want to encourage you not to say, oh, well, that doesn't have anything to do with where we are now because we're dealing with COVID. We don't have to do that. This bill was created in the moment of COVID. MTSS should use a what type of approach? Collaborative. It must include the engagement and regular communication with whom? The child's parent or guardian. So when you talk about supporting that family member, what's one way to support? By bringing them into the process. Now, the nitty gritty of it, well, does that mean when we're having our team meetings about multi-tiered system of support, there has to be a family member sitting in, because sometimes we're talking about classroom data and that's private. It's not saying that. What this means is that if you're talking about a child, that family member should not come to an IEP meeting and hear us saying, oh, well, John Doe struggled here or Jane Doe struggled here, and here's the things that we did, and these things worked and these things didn't. That should not be the first time that family member hears that. They are a partner when it comes to the practices of their child, and that does include your multi-tiered system of support framework. The parent or guardian of a child shall be provided with a written notice of the use of scientific research-based interventions or multi-tiered system of support. Now, why did they put that in there? Because many, many districts are still using RTI when it comes to there's no better way to say it, like cut scores. If children fall between here and here, this is the type of practices we're going to give to them. If they fall between here and here, they're going to get these type of practices. That's very much RTI. There's nothing wrong with that as long as you don't stop the framework there. So for this law, the Omnibus Education Act, they put in research-based, which speaks to RTI, as well as multi-tiered system of support. when you see that multi-tiered system of support, believe me, many of us advocated and worked with the legislative body to have the word multi-tiered system and not systems, because it's not many systems. It's one system, because we have many evidence-based practices. If you know the pyramid model, if you know Castle is another social emotional model. There is conscious discipline. There are so many frameworks out there that are tiered in the way that they are implemented. MTSS puts the system in the tiered supports. Now, this is the letter of the law. Dr. Taylor is telling you the intent of the law. Write this down with your pencil, papers, record me, whatever you want to do. If the letter of the law is talking about children with an IEP, the intent of the law is that any child that has a documented disability, we are clearly making sure their family members have written materials about our practices with them when it comes to intervening, accommodating, modifying before a meeting. So that would include students with a 504 plan. Does the letter of the law say that? No. But the intent of the law is that what? No family member of a child with a disability comes to a meeting and is surprised by anything that is being said as far as how we have implemented practices, documented the supports, documented the child's growth, documented the child's lack of growth, and done everything that we could to support that child as well as their teacher. Letter of the law? No. Intent of the law? Yes. I would encourage everyone joining me today, which, by the way, I'm just looking at our numbers. This is so nice to have 32 of you here with us today. Truly, because again, this is just a very unique and challenging time in our country. So signing up is one thing, but then taking the time to join is another. So here's I told you I would say it once and say it again. Thank you so much. I just peeped over there and saw that number. Okay, so do yourself a favor, make sure that you look at this, understand it as it relates to children with the individualized education program, but please include children with 504 plan in your practice. So since Illinois now has this wonderful omnibus education bill, and it talks about multi-tier system of support, here we are ahead of the curve already, because Illinois already has one holistic definition for MTSS, and you are seeing it in front of you. You see how this definition speaks to most of the letter of the law as well as the intent. Illinois is one of the few states in the country that has one definition that is used across the early childhood education and care through grade 12 community. This was created by the Illinois MTSS network because Cindy Berry's team also through ECPL facilitates the Early Childhood Education and Care MTSS committee. Again, thinking about Ktac report, they are often meeting together, Cindy with Dr. Melissa Hanish, so we can make sure that what's happening at the K-12 makes sense at the early childhood level and vice versa. When this definition came out with Cindy's support, it was adopted for the Early Childhood Education and Care MTSS committee. So one definition is what is used in Illinois. So if that defines what it is, we also can determine what it is not. It's not a special education initiative. We don't do MTSS to children because, oh, we did this so now they can get an IEP, right? It does not replace the referral and evaluation and assessment process. It is not the responsibility of clinicians and case managers. We don't do it. We didn't do RTI. We're doing MTSS with these children. It's not your curriculum. It's not your program. It is a framework. I've been talking a lot, so we're going to press pause, and in the chat, share your aha, uh-oh, or huh moment. Go ahead and jump in the chat and share that. Yes, Becky, it is a framework. And I will say, as you all are typing, that is both the blessing and kind of curse of MTSS, I have to say, because since it is a framework, the struggle that people have with MTSS is, tell me what I'm supposed to do and then I will do it. Whether the beauty of it is, you look at your data of your constituency, the area where your school is, your program is, and that data is going to tell you how to build the framework. So although it's kind of like when you're building a car. Do you need a hammer? Yes. Do you need some nails? Probably. Do you need a wrench? Yes. There are so many similar things that we use to create it, but the implementing of it is very flavored to the district or program that you're in. That's why it's a framework, right? If you know anything about painting or people that do art, you can buy different frames for different pictures according to what the taste is or what you need to frame. So Becky, it is a framework. Yes, that's what we love about it. But that also makes people get timid because, well, then now we don't know what we're supposed to do. And that's where I think the strong word comes in. Yeah, Donna, all learners, all, not just our students with disabilities, not just the children who are quote unquote at risk, right? Although the Illinois Risk and Reach report is advocating and admonishing us to stop saying that children are at risk and say that their circumstances around them are at risk, and that kind of imprints on the child. Yeah, Sarah, remote is not an excuse. Yes. Lynn, it is prevention focused. And that's when you talk about the foundation, when we talk about creating and implementing, that foundation is so important because prevention focus is universal, right? We don't say, hey, this is important to prevent our children from not doing well, but those kids, they have an IEP, so they don't need this universal practice. All literally does mean all. So Jennifer, as you all are typing, I want to address this. Jennifer, unfortunately, I know some districts that will read regarding giving IEP papers to parents will be made available as something that the parents should already know and ask about. I will tell you that is why this law is very specific. Whether the parent or the guardian asks for it or not, if you are publicly funded, and even if you are a private school in Illinois, if a child has an IEP, they are to have access to a free and appropriate public education, right? It's called FAITH, free and appropriate public education. So the district program is still supporting that private program, which means under the law, even if the family doesn't ask, we are to make sure that they have it. Now, this is not, well, they should know their child, whatever the child's diagnosis is. It's not that, Jennifer. It's literally saying that the team has been making decisions. The school has been teaching the child. We've been, we've been saying, this is how this child responds best to learning. Have we include the family member in there? We must do that. And so the law is very, very clear. And believe me, when I tell you, this was not something that was not well thought out. This is July 1, 2020, this law was signed. This dates back to November 2018. Yeah, November 2018. There were many, many subject matter hearings that were held about this very subject. And when I say many and long, we would get to the subject matter hearing at 9 o'clock at night. When we left at 5 o'clock, it was dark outside. The House of Representatives in Illinois held many, many meetings, listening to many family members, many practitioners, and from 2018, 2019, this law, this language was worked on. So when I say to you that in that omnibus education bill, kind of no excuses, just results, believe me when I tell you. Please, please, please believe me when I tell you. Melissa, the parents are so appreciative to know what's going on before they come to that meeting. They feel more in the know. Melissa, that's so wonderfully well said. It can be intimidating, virtually or face to face. And yes, it is their child. But if you are a parent or a grandparent or an aunt or an uncle or a godmother, you know that in your heart you hold an image of the child that you love. And when you are in a meeting and you are hearing that the reality of that child versus the image and the ideal of that child may not be the same, that sometimes is a hard pill to swallow. Then you have all of this information coming at you that you have to try to process in that moment in time. And then, okay, sign off on this. This is what we're going to do. And here's how we're going to write the plan. It's too much. So we've got to make sure that we have that practice in place that informs the family. So Melissa, thank you. That is so wonderfully well said. Jessica talking about not being surprised by supports. Oh, Jessica, thank you for being so candid. And I'm gonna before we move on, I'm gonna read this. And you know, Cindy, we're just always so blessed. Everyone that participates is so willing to be candid and honest so that we can learn from each other. So here's what our colleague Jessica Atherton is saying, talking about not being surprised by supports. Just received my daughter's IEP goals, and it seems she was not logging on to speech sessions. However, we were unaware that the sessions were even taking place. The teacher mentioned emailing her, but I never received anything. That important part of communicating with parents. So there you have it. One of our own colleagues is sharing her personal concerns with us as not only a colleague but a family as to what this looks like and the impact it has when we're really not involving our families. I just love that. Thank you so much, Jessica. And then before we move on, Natalie, we need to work to bring the frame. Yes, ma'am. We need to work to bring that framework much, much better to PIEI and DCFS for sure. There were some conversations about that. In fact, after the ESSA 2020 conference, there was a lot of conversation about that. And then, of course, March, everything hit. And of course, we had to make necessary pivots. So those conversations, and rightfully so, did not move forward. But hopefully, as we find our way to continue to journey through this moment in time that we are in, those are things that we can pick back up again to be more inclusive with the DCFS, especially that DCFS piece. Thank you all so much for sharing. And most people are saying involvement of parents, involvement of awareness of framework for families. Yes, yes, yes. Listening to the parents, listening to the parents. I thank you all so much for sharing. This is wonderful. Thank you so much. And Jessica, I'm going to move on, but you know, everybody's got a lot on their plates right now, Jessica. You are teaching. If you're on here tonight, you are a professional somewhere in the state of Illinois when it comes to education. So you're trying to be you're professional, you're a parent, you're a mom, you know, all of these things. So many things can go on. Assuming positive intent, that's why the law is saying you must do everything that you can, more than once, to make sure that families are fully informed. We're going to show ourselves grace, because that is what is definitely needed right now. We talked about the history itself of multi-tiered system of support / RTI. I always like to say MTSS is RTI all grown up. So what are the data components? And this is huge because I tell you, as a consultant, I travel around the state. I am blessed to be the co-chair of the Early Childhood Education and Care MTSS committee. Cindy and I, we have this conversation, and we hear this so much from folks around the state. The data and that darn triangle. So let's talk about the data. Let's answer this question. Which came first? Not the chicken or the egg. We're going to answer the question, which came first, the data or the triangle? So much conversation. And I would say not only conversation, but so many MTSS frameworks. People have tried to build them around the triangle, that it has created a barrier and it has frustrated so many people. So hopefully we can resolve some of that today as we talk about defining. So which came first, the triangle or the data? The data came first. As with most things, some type of report comes out. Some, they look at NWEA data across the country. They look at, attendance data. So much data is looked at. And then somebody does a report and says, hey, you know what? Only about 80 to 90% of all children are successful when we implement our evidence-based practices to fidelity. But some children still are not. Well, which are the children? It depends upon where the area is, but somewhere around 5 to 10% are not successful with that universal practices. But they are successful if you take those universal evidence-based practices and target the support. Maybe it's a small group. Maybe it is seeing if there's a multilingual learner, what support that child may need. And then the data showed that even with evidence-based practices are implemented to fidelity, and we take those same practices and for some of our children, we target specifically instruction and techniques and strategies for them, still, for some reason, 1 to 5% of all children in the country still struggle. And so for those children, we need to look at something that's a little bit more intense. We don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. So in other words, whatever your universal practices were, those evidence-based practices, those things that you said that you were doing in your building for all learners and all educators, you continue to do that. You look at what was targeted. You look at the documentation from that. You may have seen some progress, but not all the progress that you want. And so now we need to do some one-on-one with this particular child, something more individualized, something more intense. The data came first. Now, what happens when you get data? For people who are very visual, and sometimes just to make it easier to talk about, a picture is created. Hence, the RTI triangle was born. This is not a pyramid. It is a one-dimensional triangle. From that triangle being born, people said, well, the green is what we want, right? That yellow is cautionary. And that red, boop, boop, danger, Will Robinson. Dating myself again, lost in space. But, you know, that tier 3, that means, wow, we really need to be doing something specific for these children. So which came first, the triangle or the data? The data came first. Under No Child Left Behind, once that triangle was formed, then we start putting in, trying to fill in the language behind it. Okay, universal means what? All students. It's prevention. It's proactive. Tier 2 means what? Some students might be at risk of not meeting achievable and sustainable outcomes. So what are we going to do? We're going to look at the instructional practices that we need to have that are targeted for those students. Then some students, we're going to take all of that in a little bit more higher intensity and maybe do something a little bit more individualized. So under No Child Left Behind, IDA, and RTI, this is what it looked like. But then by default, this is what we started hearing. Oh, you know, Jaquan, he's an RTI kid. We have an RTI room. He or she is a tier 1 student, a tier 2 student, tier 3 student. Now, for anyone who knows about specialized services, you know that we fought for years to have people first language. We advocated for years so that children wouldn't be described as, oh, he's an LD student or she's an autism student. She is a child with a diagnosis of autism. John Doe is a child with a diagnosis of learning disability. Jane Doe is a student with a diagnosis of developmental delay. We don't put the diagnosis in front of the child. We put the child in front of the diagnosis. So when we started hearing RTI, he's an RTI kid, that's the same thing as labeling. This is important because under the law, when you start talking about labeling and RTI room, that's placement. And anytime you talk about placement under the law, you must have something signed by the parent that says, oh, I know that they're talking about my child in this way, and my child is being shifted in all these rooms because of their struggle to learn or their struggle to develop in a certain domain. That was a default of RTI, the data, and the triangle that was formed. So, are the historical components of MTSS data different? No. The research continues to show us that when practices are implemented to fidelity, 80 to 90% of all children, including students with disabilities, multilingual learners, children who are experiencing temporary homelessness, they will be successful. The data continues to tell us that we will still need in our portfolio of practices to be able to pivot and address the needs of some students in a more targeted way. And the data still continues to tell us that for some students, we will need to do something a little bit more intense. So the historical component is the same for MTSS, but with a broader understanding, we know that it could be a triangle, it could be a chart, it could be a pie chart. We are in management of the data. The data is not in management of us. We get to tell the triangle what to do. The triangle doesn't tell us what to do. And I'm just going to go back and show that again. the historical components of MTSS, and this happens when we look at data, but we don't have to stick it in a triangle. Maybe you do, but maybe you have a bar graph. Maybe you do a pie chart. What matters is our practice. What matters is our practice. Our fundamental, our targeted, our intense. Guess what? Well, Dr. Taylor, I like triangles. Great. Make a triangle. Use whatever color you want. Because who's in charge? You are. At that foundational level. Yes, Lynn. Woohoo! So we really need to look at foundational and expand. Well, see, it's not that you're expanding the tier, because your data is pretty much going to tell you what's happening with your universal practices. And remember, not just for students, for educators as well. There you go. It's the strategies and supports. And I've consulted with programs that have said, whoa, my gosh, when we look at who needs targeted supports for us, it's more like 40 to 50%. When the targeted and intense support is higher than that suggested 1 to 5% or 5 to 10%, especially if I'm an administrator, I need to press pause. And I need to start saying, what is it that our teachers need more from us to be prepared to teach in the moment that they are in? Because, see, MTSS, it is a micro system that can make macro impact. So, for instance, if your district would look at your data and you would say, you know what? Our data is showing us that too many of our first graders, or since this is early childhood education and care, I'll say kindergarten. Our data is telling us too many of our kindergarten children, when we look at our kids survey, our data is telling us that too many of our kindergarten children are not quite where we would like for them to be when it comes to math literacy. Okay, and it's not just 1 or 2%, it's a large percent. Okay, so that would let me know we need to partner with our pre-K, PFA, PFAE partners in our district to provide those teachers with more support around implementing math literacy so that the children can benefit from what the teachers know and are able to implement. If it were a higher grade, and I've worked with districts that have done this, they look at their data and they will say, wow, you know what? This is not just Miss Johnson's third grade class that's not on grade level when it comes to reading. Our whole district, our third graders are not at grade level when it comes to reading. See, that data now lets me know this is a macro problem. It's systemic. So we need to determine, what do we need to do prior to prior to third grade, so that when our children get to third grade, they are reading at grade level. The data, and that's why we don't want our data to be that scarlet letter A. Look at your Eckers 3 report. Look at your class report. Call the police. We aren't gold. We don't want to look at it as a scarlet letter. That makes us afraid to even look at the data. It makes us angry at the data. We want to get in communication and conversation and dialogue with that data, because that will inform our practice. The true goal would be there is no triangle, because all of our students would be successful. But the truth and the reality that we live in is that we know we at least need to be prepared to have targeted and intensive supports ready, because the data continues to show us that 100% of children, for whatever reason, are not always successful with sustainable outcomes, even when we do our very, very best practices to implement universal practices to fidelity. So Lynn, thank you for bringing that up. And I love that pivot. You pivoted very quickly there. Is the 5 to 10% based on the individual class or the grade level as a whole? So when you look at this data that I've showed you here, that was national data. So as No Child Left, and the truth is, Jennifer, thank you so much for asking that. And I am watching the time, everyone. I'm going to be true to my word and get you out of here a little bit early. But these are really great questions, so I want to try to address them. So to be honest with you, Jennifer, when No Child Left Behind was created, it was actually an equity imperative. And that equity imperative was that too many children of color were identified as becoming eligible for specialized services under IDEA, which means the creation of an IEP plan. There was a disproportionate amount of children of color that were being recognized and placed in specialized services without data to support. Did these same children have access to equitable educational experiences? The IEP, the referral and evaluation process under the law, it's very, very scripted. A written referral takes place. That referral has to be responded to. That has to be in writing. From that point on, it's very, very prescriptive. But the unknown was, well, what happened before they got to the point of needing their referral? No one could, not enough people, I should say, were able to really articulate the practices for all children. So when No Child Left Behind was created, they were looking at that data, and that data was showing, wait a minute, universally across this country, we are having children who 15% at least are not realizing student achievement and sustaining student achievement across grade levels. And so instead of saying we're going to wait for them to fail, we need to start recognizing that there is a problem and do something before that. And that literally comes from, we need to determine how children respond to interventions. By default, it got all mixed up in a quagmire about, well, what is interventions? If it has to be, because No Child Left Behind said scientific based, what does scientific based mean? Okay, that means we have to start doing X, Y, Z. And what we did not realize is that instruction is the intervention. The educator is, in fact, the intervention. When you show up in that classroom, when you show up on that Google platform or that Zoom platform, you are the best chance that our children have. So your instructional practices, that means understanding the curriculum, understanding and implementing the standards properly, understanding screenings. What is the purpose of screenings? What can this data from this screening tell me? I don't know this child. That's the purpose for screening. I mean, Head Start led the way on that many, many years ago. You need to screen the children because you literally don't know what you're getting. Well, is that screener a checklist? Well, we did it because we got the PFA program. We want to keep our grant, and the ECRS 3 people are coming. We're going to be monitored. Did we screen them? Yeah. What screener are we using? We're using the Dial 4. Well, where are the results of the screening? In the QRI department in the cabinet somewhere. But where are the children? Over there in the building. So we didn't take that screening data and teach our teachers. When we see this, we know that our incoming students, this is the incoming students that we have. So we know we're going to need to set up our classrooms in this way. We're going to know how to make our initial small groups based off of our screening information. Assessment, authentic inquiry-based assessment. All of these things are practices. All of these things are practices that teachers need access to. And when you look at the micro is me, I'm the teacher, but the macro is when you look at that universal data. And so none of this was about one particular state or one particular school in a district. That data that came first before the triangle literally was people looking at what was happening around our country and saying, hey, look at this data. The data is also telling us there's a disproportionate amount of children who are being farmed into specialized services without anybody understanding what happened before the process. And on top of all of that, it appears that we're kind of waiting for children to fail rather than intervening in advance. As we transition to multi-tier system of support, now we're beginning to realize it's not about you got to intervene. It's not a shot, like you do something to the child. It's good instruction. It's ongoing professional learning, looking at over and over and over again, what are our practices? Does everybody who needs to know? And when a child presents with this type of data, or a classroom teacher presents with this type of data, what is the support that we're going to give them? That was a really, really good question, Jennifer and Lynn. Thank you for sharing that in the chat. Here is the big thing. Take this with you, put it in your suitcase, wave your flag, tell them, when you hear that, Dr. Taylor told me to tell you, excuse me. The practices are in the tiers, not the children, not the teacher, not the school, not the district. The evidence-based practices and supports are in tiers. Children are not tier 1. Educators are not tier 1. I don't care what that Danielson report says. If you're in Chicago Public Schools, they use REACH. I don't care what that Eckers 3 summer report says, what that class report says. Educators are not in tiers. The support that is needed to elevate the practice may be foundational, may be targeted, may be intensive. But the child, the human being, their self, they're not in a box. They're not in a tier. I love this graphic, even though it says response to intervention, because of the side piece to it. You see how it takes that green, yellow, and red and then morphs it into this kind of watercolor spread that literally shows that it's not putting children or practices in a box. They touch each other. They're interrelated. They're interdependent. So although this says response to intervention, is the best graphic that I've seen yet that kind of shows how it's like it weaves and dodges in and out with each other. Thoughts, comments, questions? Go ahead and put them in the chat. I know this is a lot to take in, especially if you are in a district or program that does not talk about multi-tier system of supports in this way. And I've had some folks even to say, well, Dr. Taylor, if what we're doing isn't the truth, then what is? This is the truth. This is the facts, ma'am, just the facts, what I've presented to you here today. As we kind of shift to finishing out, when you think of your own practice, and I specifically put this here, your own practice, Because would that we could change the world, right? Especially we could change more collaboration of early childhood education and care in kindergarten and community-based programs with district PFA and PFAE programs. Sometimes we can't change the world, but we can reflect on our own practice. So I want everyone to just briefly describe or pick one thing from our time together that resonates with you the most. And that would also be the thing that you would say, you know, within the next 2 weeks, I am going to fill in the blank. Becky, yeah, the IEP process. And when we do the creating and implementing, I'm going to talk about that a little bit more. What the IEP process is, it is literally just a referral. And when a referral is received by law, we must act. It's just a referral. If the referral is approved, then as we go through the referral and evaluation process, which by the way can take up to 60 school days, what does that child that is being considered for this referral and evaluation process, what does that child deserve from us? They deserve good instruction, good supports. They deserve for us to document, this is what we're doing. They deserve for us to be talking to their family members so that, say we reach that point where the evaluation process is complete and now a team is coming to the table and the child does meet the criteria for specialized services. As the educator, you bring forth all this good documentation of what has worked for the child so that if an IEP needs to be created, it can be one based off of qualitative information about the child rather than just a cold diagnosis. Well, they have autism, let's write an IEP. So that referral and evaluation process, it's not either or, it's this and that. It's literally this and that. Yes, Jessica, the child and the classroom are not a tier. Everything, instruction is the intervention. And I, like, that's what and I'm sticking to it. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm sticking to it because it places the value, not the burden, but it places the value on the adults supporting the children. And if we value our educators, then we must support our educators, right? We have to make sure, and administrators, directors of programs, we've got to find a way to make sure that ongoing opportunities to learn professionally is in place for our staff. There's no getting around it. We can't do it last month. We can't do it. Oh, we did that in 2019. We did that in 2020. We've got to have a way to continue to go back and make sure, hey, are we all okay? This is how we're practicing. You know, this is our curriculum. Hey, let's have another conversation about the standards. You know, this meeting, we're just going to talk about the language standards. How are we all doing with them? Do we understand the benchmarks? Do we understand the descriptors? We've got to continue to do that. Because I truly believe when the educators are supported and giving everything that they need, it will naturally and authentically benefit the children. Yes, look at the data first. The purpose of data, what's based on the data, what do we need? Look at the screener. Yes, Lynn. Look at the screener. Sarah, strategize different ways to share screening data with teachers. Get it in their hands. I am already excited and I feel, yes. Donna, instruction is the intervention. You are important. The educator is important. There's no other way to get around it. No other way to get around it. Looking at just a few more before I go on. Yes, Chelsea, no longer waiting for children to fail in order to respond. The change to prevention will benefit the growth of the whole child, the entire child. Children come to us academically, behaviorally, medicinally sometimes. There are some children who may have a medical diagnosis. We want to be able to access all the parts of the children, right? All of who they are as they come to us. We have social and emotional learning standards. How are we understanding those standards? How are we looking at National Center for Pyramid Model Interventions? CASEL, many districts are using CASEL, conscious discipline. How are we implementing that through the lens of our standards? How are we taking those practices and putting them in our universal? Universal is the foundation. It's the thing that makes the building, the district, the program, the heartbeat. Everything that's important to know, it's got to go in that foundation, because everything else you do is built on top of it. Yeah, Wanda, it is not at all to be used to delay special education process. And the flip side of that, Wanda, is that we certainly are not supposed to say, well, we've been doing MTSS, so we know that she has autism. No. You still have to go through the referral and evaluation process. That collective information may help you when you come to interviewing teachers and the social worker interviewing and sitting down at the meeting, but it doesn't take the place of it. And we must never say, well, we haven't done MTSS yet, or we haven't tried this strategy for 10 weeks yet, so we're going to delay or deny the referral. Wonderful feedback, everyone. Thank you all so much. And David, what a wonderful note for us to close on. And David, I noted that you are a paraprofessional. And so I love that you're saying educators, because when you walk into that classroom, educator. And I love that ECHRS 3 is so specific around that. When we say staff, ECHRS 3 means if you're an adult, you're in that classroom, you are regularly engaged with that child, you're considered educator. So educators are important. We take this with us as we transition from our time together today. Please remember the table talk if your schedule will allow. Now, if you do the table talk, we will literally be back to back. The table talk is January 27th, and then the creating and implementing an early childhood multi-tiered system of support, evidence-based framework, say that fast 5 times or 3 times or even 1 time. See how well you do. It's February 3rd. So, look at your time, look at your capacity. When you get the link for the table talk, you are automatically invited because you were a part here today, but you still must register. And that's simply because, it is live, and I have to prepare for that. And then my special guest, I have to prepare for it as well. We don't just kind of get on and say, hey, what do you guys want to talk about? It is still structured. So you look at the link for that, and you do need to register. And then keep in mind again that right after that next week is the creating and implementing early childhood multi-tiered system of supports, evidence-based framework. And the parentheses for that one is working smarter, not harder. That is it for me. I thank you all so very much. So many of us were hanging on to 2020, and we just felt like, if I can just get to December 31st, 11:59 p.m. Whew. Then we entered 2021, and 2021 seems to be holding some surprises for us as well. but I still want to continue to wish you a blessed, healthy, and prosperous 2021. I want to remind all of us that life without rest is not sustainable. Life without rest is not sustainable. Therefore, teaching without rest is not sustainable. Being a parent without rest is not sustainable. Being a human being without rest is not sustainable. So every moment that you can, relax, relate, release, decompress, get off social media, turn the TV off, inhale, exhale, tuckle turtle, whatever you need to do to get yourself that rest. And again, very blessed, healthy, and prosperous 2021 to all of you. I hope I'll see you on January 27th for the table talk, and on February 3rd. If by chance I do not, I thank you so very much for your